Hello, welcome back to Gordon's channel. We've come to lesson 9 of a to-do list app series. And in this lesson, our main focus is to identify the data. And our learning objective will be a checkbox element property called checked. And we will learn the JS element property, the dataset. And we will learn its corresponding representation in the HTML, which is the data hyphen and then the key. And then we will learn an array method called splice. And this splice accepts two arguments. One is the index, one is the number. So let's get to what we have ended last time. So we have put the to-do and the category into local storage. But if we have marked some item as done, and if we have deleted some item, then it is not saved in our data. So the reason is that I've created a slideshow to demonstrate. So we have stored the to-do and the category into our local storage. And now what we want to do is to store the checkbox state into our local storage as well. So let's get to do it. So here we will need to go to our where we create the object. So it is here. We create the object here in the add entry function. And now we are going to add one more property. So let me demonstrate a bad habit now. So let's say we call it done because we want to check whether this item is done. So this property will be called a boolean. This will be a boolean. So it will be true and false, and the default is false. And if you see its color change to this light blue color in the VS Code, it means that you are typing the keyword, reserved keyword correctly. And now we want to store this done into this too. So let's try it. If we save it and we create a one element to do 3, category 3, you see now for the new data we are saving also the done false into it. So the next thing we want to do is check how to know the state of this checkbox, and it is here. It is by this checkbox property called checked. So here if we go to so we create our checkbox in the function render row. Okay. And inside render row, if we this checkbox we have a click event listener called done. And this notice that this one has a name collision here, and it will cause a problem later. So we will explain the console error. So here inside done, let's console log the property. So this is referring to the clicked target, which is the checkbox, and this dot checked will be used to check whether this checkbox is clicked. So let's go to the console, and if we choose one checkbox to click it, we'll see it has console log true because this one is clicked. If I unclick it, we'll see it has console log false because we have unclicked it. So here, this is the checked property. So here, what we will want to do is we will go to the to-do list and array, to-do list array, and find the element, and then mark is done property as the same as the checked state of this checkbox element. You see, this is what we will want to do next. All right. But now we want to know how to know which array element to mark. So this is the challenge of this lesson, which is how to identify the data. And of course, we can identify it in two ways. One of the way is to loop over this table and find which row we are clicking. For example, if we find that we are clicking on the third row, then we can -1 because this is one of the row which we don't need to handle. So we can find the index in the array. So this is one of the way. But in the later lesson, I will demonstrate a feature here, and we will we align these items based on the date and the time. So, and then this sequence will be different from where it is in the array. So we won't use the loop over the table to find the row method. So we will add an ID to our object, just like how we add the done to our object. So everything just the same. So we go to the add entry function. So this is our add entry function, and here we are adding the ID to our object. So here the ID, and this is another challenge. So let me put the main part in the next lesson. But here let us be simple and use to-do list array.length first. So here we will use a comma to separate the object property. If you use a semicolon here, we will see an console error. So we need to use comma, and we assign the ID as the length of the to-do list. So let's save it, and let's try it. For example, if I have to do 4, and the category is 4, if I add it, you see now we are creating a new data with the ID property, and this ID is 3 because I am using array length, and at that time it has 3 elements, so I will use the ID 3 into here. And now we will need to based on this ID, pass this ID on this checkbox. And how to pass this ID on this checkbox? Which is by the dataset property. So let's go to our render row. So we are basically switching between the add entry and the render row. And here, after we create this checkbox element, we assign its type, we add the event listener, and we do one more thing now. We assign its dataset, and dataset is a collection of data. It is just like an object, so you need to specify what property you want to assign. So for example, if I want to assign its ID data as, so this data should come from the ID we have initiated when we create the object in add entry. And here we have passed that object by using this by as an argument, and we destructure it. We change to the to-do. We name it as input value. We change the category. We name it as input value 2. And here, let's just get the ID. All right, we don't need to rename it. Just use ID here. And here, if we assign the ID as the dataset.id of this checkbox element, if we go to our here, if we it should be here already. So if we go to here, inspect it, right click on the checkbox, choose inspect, you see we have data ID 3. All right, data ID 3 because we have for the third element, for the fourth element we have ID 3. So we are storing data ID 3 onto this checkbox. And for the previous checkbox, we don't have the data element. So here, the data ID will become undefined. And this data-ID is what I want to introduce as a third learning objective in this lesson. Because the data set in the JavaScript, when reflected in the HTML, it is data hyphen and then the property name. All right, so we can check it here. So this undefined will cause problem later. So let us remove it. We go to the console, we go to the local storage and delete this one. Right click, delete. So it will get us rid of the error. Okay. So now what we need to do is, based on this ID, to find the array element which we want to update is update is done property. So here, let's check it. So this is the current checkbox element and is dataset.id. Let's console log it. So now we need to recreate some sample. for example, to do 1 with the category 1, and to do 2 with the category 2. All right. Now, if I have check the console, if I click on it, I see ID 0. If I click on it, I see ID 1. All right. So this is how to get the ID from the data set of this checkbox element. And now I will use this to check whether it is the target one. So I will use a for loop to loop over the array. So for example, I use a very simple one, the most traditional for loop. So let I equals 0, and the I is smaller than the to-do list array dot length, and each time the step is 1. So I will loop over the to-do list array, and if something happens, which is the to-do list element, the ith element, and its done property, not the done property, the ID property is the same as this one. Copy and paste it or drag it, because we have already test this expression with the console log. So it is a good practice to drag it here instead of typing it again. And here we can save one curly bracket if we are using one row after if. So this one is to mark this element as done. So let's get it. Again, we copy and paste, copy and paste, and this one is the to-do list array, the ith element. The ith element of the to-do list array is done property should be updated based on the checked state of this checkbox element. All right. So this is what we want to do. So let's try it. Now, in the application, we can see that the done are both false. And if I click on one of them, all right, we don't see the reflection in our local storage because we have missed one thing. We need to call the save here. You need to call the save function, and this will store our update to-do list array into the local storage. So let's try it again. Now, if I click on it, I will save. So you see the done becomes true. And if I click on the second one, you can see that the done becomes true too. So this is storing this. So this is how to store this state of the checkbox into the local storage. And of course, we need to do the reverse part. So get the local storage state back to our web page. So here we go to the when we have get the item from the local storage, we call the render rows, and render rows will call the render row. So here, whether it is done or not is in this object passed into the render row. So here we will get also the done property. We will also get the done property, and here you see it also, the VS Code is already hinting us that this done has a name collection with this done callback, and it will actually cause a error. So I want to keep it this way now because I want to demonstrate that console error message. Okay, so we will solve it later. So here, if I have marked this as done, and I will go to here. So after I have rendered this row, I will check the, first of all, I will do something reverse of this one. So here I am inside the done callback, I will update the done array property based on the checkbox property. But now I want to do something opposite. I will update the check property based on the done of this. All right. But let us check whether this done is what we want to save. Console log done. All right. So if I check it, for example, if I click it and then I save it, you see it is not reflected. Okay. if I have saved it and I have saved it, it is saved as true. If I take it, untake it, it is updated as false. If I refresh it, both is not reflected. So we need to add the strike too. So let's add the strike too. Else. All right. So we need to check whether it is done. If it is done, then I will add the strike. The strike is added here. So in the previous way, we use the toggle method of the classes and toggle this class name strike. All right. And now we will not use toggle, but we will use add and remove based on the Boolean value of this done. All right. So if I save it, and you see, when we have one true, one false, it will take both. And this problem is here. If as we have a console log done here, you see it shows us a function, and this function is nothing but this callback. So it is this done is getting this callback instead of this destructured property, because this is a name collision. So here we should rename one of them. For example, we can rename this one as the checkbox click callback. All right, let's rename this as checkbox click callback. And here you can see that this one should be checkbox click callback. All right, checkbox click callback. This color is check click callback. You see, when the color is wrong, when this one is brighter, this one is dimmer. When you see that this one is dimmer, it means that it is not used anywhere, and it also hints you that it is not used anywhere. So we need to copy this checkbox click callback, copy this and put it here. Paste. Now this one will get back to a lighter color, and this one means that it is called successfully. So this is one of the way to handle this. So if we have do it correctly, it should get the add and remove the class based on its stored done property here. Okay, and this checkbox we need to update this too. So here the problem is that this done is correct, and this checked should apply not on this, because this is used in this one. When we have the event callback, this is referring to the event target. But inside here, when we render the row, we should not use this. We should use this checkbox element. All right, checkbox element.checked equals done. Okay, we have an error here because I have missing an M. My copy and paste, I miss an M. Now we can see that this box is ticked and this row is crossed out. If I cross out both rows, I refresh, it cross out both rows. If I have one row not cross, one row cross, if I refresh, it is the same. So this is how to save the completed or not state into our local storage and getting it back. And the next thing we want to do is to splice it, to delete it. So again, we need to delete the entry and let it remember that we have deleted an entry. So now what we want to do is actually the same steps as our marking as done. So we will go to add the ID on the delete button first. So this one, adding the ID on the checkbox element, we will copy this and go to the delete buttons section and assign this on the delete button. So the delete button is the span element, and span element.dataset.id will be the same as ID. So if we save it and then we inspect the delete button, we can see that it starts to get the data ID attribute too. All right, so we have done it correctly, and now we can go to our the callback. So the callback is delete item. So we go to the delete item. Now we will do something more, which is we will update the, of course, we will need to update it too. So let's copy this one here. All right. So we will need to do something. First thing is we will need to loop over our array, and if the array element ID is the same as the ID stored in the delete button, then here what we will do is this array, I will use the splice method to take some element out permanently. And this here it is setting two argument. The first one is the start number, which is index, and the second one is how many number to delete. And the start number is the index, and the second one is optional. If you don't input it, it will remain. You move everything after this element. So, but we won't only want to remove one, so we should input one. See, this is the number of element to remove, and this is the index of the element, the starting element to remove. So we will use to-do list.splice I1, and then we save it into the local storage to update it. So let's try it. For example, we now have two elements, and we have two elements in the local storage. If I delete this one, for example, the to-do one, you see we have already deleted to-do one, and if we refresh, we don't see to-do one again. So we have successfully deleted the item also. But now I can tell you that actually we have a problem here. So the problem is that if I say add a to-do free, all right, and the category is free, all right, now you see that in the application, in the local storage, we see that we have two elements with the ID 1. This is because we don't have any checking on the ID, and we are using a simple way to generate ID by the array length. So now we have two elements with ID 1. This will of course cause a problem. So if I want to delete to-do free, okay, if I want to delete to-do free, if I click on it, you see in the web page, the to-do free is gone and the to-do 2 remains. But in our data, what is kept is to-do free is remains and to-do 2 is gone. So if we refresh, we see it becomes to-do free. We have kept to-do free, which we doesn't want, and we have deleted the one which we want. So we will need to fix this, and in the next lesson. So I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Thank you. Bye bye.